What's going on, everyone? My name is Joseph Costanzo, and in this video I'm going to talk about a movement that is one of the pillars of physical fitness, and that is the squat. The squat is such an important part of any fitness program because of its completeness. It checks off so many different boxes. Number one, it's great for muscular development and building strength because you recruit so many different muscle groups throughout the movement, and you're able to move such a considerable amount of weight every time you do it. Number two, it's great for mobility. It's great for assessing, maintaining, and improving one's mobility, because the squat, when done properly, moves 3 different joints through a complete range of motion, that being the ankle, the knee, and the hip. And because the range of motion required to squat across those 3 joints is so great, the squat tends to either showcase someone's great mobility or to expose their lack of mobility. And then number 3, the squat translates really well to acts of daily living. Think about how many times a day you stand up out of a chair or you squat down to pick something up like an object or a child. Our bodies move in a way that mimic the squat countless times every day without even realizing it. And so again, because of its completeness, the squat can be utilized to achieve such a wide variety of fitness goals. And for that reason, if you aspire to reach any level of success regarding fitness, it is essential that you develop a good understanding of the squat. Our first step to understanding the squat is to take a look at the inner workings of the movement. What muscles are being utilized in order to create the squat and make it possible? There are 2 main muscle groups that are responsible for creating the movement known as the squat. The first main group is the hip extensor group. This group can be further divided into the gluteus group and the hamstring group. The second main group is the knee extensor group, also known as the quadriceps group. And when the knee extensor group works simultaneously with the hip extensor group, that creates the movement known as the squat. Now, as I said before, the previous 2 groups are responsible for creating the movement of the squat. But there are other muscles that work during the squat that instead of creating movement, they prevent movement. They stabilize. There are 2 things mainly that need to be stabilized during the squat. The first is our own spine. When we squat, we need to make sure that our spine maintains its natural curves. This is known as a neutral spine position. And the muscles responsible for maintaining this position are the erector spinae of the back, the rectus abdominis from the front, and the obliques from either side. The second thing that needs to be stabilized during a squat is actually not a part of our own body, but it's the bar. Weight that moves or shifts will always be harder to lift than a stable, fixed weight. And for this reason, when we squat with a bar, we use the muscles of our upper and mid back to pinch the bar tightly between our traps and our hands holding onto the bar. Now that we understand how our bodies perform the squat, let's take a look at the actual execution of the squat. Step 1, we're going to adjust the cups that the bar rests on in accordance with our body. We don't want the bar to rest too high or too low, because although that's fine when there's no weight on the bar, once we add weight to the bar, it's going to become increasingly difficult and dangerous for us to re-rack the bar after a set if it's supposed to sit too high or too low. Ideally, when we walk up to the bar is going to rest at the level of my shoulder or just below. So this is perfect for me. Step 2, we're going to grip the bar outside the width of our shoulders. Step 3, we're going to pull ourselves under and lift the elbow. And what I mean by that is we're going to bring the elbow from this position to this position. And the reason we do that is because as I raise the elbow, my hand will naturally go forward and down. When we do this while holding the bar on our back, it's going to push the bar into my back, further reinforcing its position and stabilizing the bar for me. So again, step 3, we're going to pull ourselves under and we're going to lift the elbow. Step 4, we unrack, step back, and adjust our feet. Ideally, the width of our feet is going to be at the width of the shoulders or slightly wider. And the angle of our feet is going to be anywhere from 0 degrees, toes pointed straight forward, or 0 to 30 degrees, toes pointed slightly outward. Step 5, we're going to sit the hips back and descend to proper depth. Step 6, we're going to drive the hips straight up. And step 7, we're going to walk the bar into the rack and descend. Now that we've gone over the proper way to squat, let's go over some common mistakes and how we'd fix them. The first mistake is the heels coming off the ground. With the proper squat, the entire foot, from the toes to the forefoot to the heel, maintain their connection with the ground throughout the entire rep. Whereas when people's heel come off the ground, their toes and their forefoot stay on the ground, but their heel loses its connection. The person doing it the wrong way is generally trying to sink their hips straight down. And the only way to do that is to come up on your toes. Whereas with a proper squat, as we talked about before, we're not trying to sink our hips straight down. We're pushing our hips back. And as we push our hips back, there's no need for our heel to come off the ground. We have plenty of range of motion here to keep the entire foot on the ground. Whereas if we're going to try to sink our hips straight down, which is the wrong way, there's no way to keep your heel on the ground. So a lot of times this is not a problem of mobility, but rather the person's never been taught how to properly squat. They're under the impression that you have to sink straight down when you don't. You get to push your hips back as if you're sitting in a chair. Another common issue is concave knees. Sometimes this is caused by muscular imbalances. The muscles that pull the knees apart, the hip abduction muscles, are not strong enough to maintain their position, and so the knees will concave. If this is your issue, then you'll need to incorporate hip abduction exercises into your program. Other times the person doesn't know they're doing it, or they neglect to correct this pattern, and if that's the case, then I recommend using this to keep you on track. Imagine a line that starts at your heels, runs through your big toe, and continues on. This line represents the direction that your toes are pointing. Your knees need to point in that same direction. So as I squat, I'm concentrating on keeping my knees on these imaginary lines, tracing the line, making sure my knees always point in the same direction as the big toes. Squatting with concave knees would look something like this, and my knees do not match the line. The line goes out like this, and the knees point in this direction. We need to get those on track, so we pull the knees apart, and now we continue to focus on making sure the knees trace that line throughout the duration of the squat. Concentrate on these imaginary lines during your squat for as long as it takes to correct the pattern, and eventually it'll become natural. Hey, thanks for watching that video. Let me know what you think, and let me know what you want to see next. I'll see you next time.